Hi, welcome back to our channel. Today we're looking at chapter 13, the last chapter of The Ending of Time. The chapter starts out with another rather bleak assessment of Krishnamurti. That runs something like, in spite of knowledge, in spite of centuries of evolution, man has never been free of problems. And consecutively, the term problem is elaborated upon, and they distinguish two categories of problems. On the one hand, there is what they call technical problems, and on the other, there's human problems. And while technical problems can be solved, human problems seem insoluble. So they then inquire more deeply into the category of human problems, and there are some exemplary attempts made to describe them, So, for instance, and I'm just going to list a couple of those attempts. So there are now far more nations in the world than there used to be, and each one creates new problems. Tribes become nations. Groups fight their neighbors. There's a lack of freedom. There's a sense of constant uncertainty and fear. There's a struggle to work for a livelihood for the rest of one's life. Everybody's caught up in his own little fragment, solving whatever he thinks he can solve, but it all ends up to chaos. Well, if we look at current events, I think we would have to concur with this assessment. So, and like so many times before in this book, the question then is put forth: what is the root of all this? What is the cause of all this human chaos? And consecutively, attempts are made in this chapter to identify the root of so-called human problems. And there is a statement from David Bohm that I want to read to you real quick. We not only have opinions, but self-interest. If two people have conflicting self-interests, there is no way, as long as they maintain their attachment to these, that they can work together. And a little further on in the text, we can extract a hypothesis that I feel it attempts to explain what is happening. Lack of attention leads to the fragmentation of mind, which leads to the attachment and identification of mind with things, circumstances, attributes, and so on. So the term attention, or the lack thereof, is then discussed at length, and it is argued that in order to get out of chaos, there needs to be a change in human mind. But one deciding factor to bring about that change is attention, and by that they mean the ability to observe deeply whatever it is that is holding the person and preventing them from changing. And when there is attention, there is no center from which I attend. So what follows from this is that resting in a type of consciousness which is centered around the notion of an I or me, is but one state of consciousness, is but one possible state of consciousness or of being. And what it implies is that there's also at least one other state of being which is different from that, which is different from I consciousness. And the qualities of that different state of consciousness or different state of being or different state of mind are said to be attention, perception, intelligence, and love. So those are supposedly 4 qualities that this different state of being, this different state of consciousness has. And not only do they seem to be qualities that could potentially solve human problems, but they seem to be qualities of a sort of transpersonal, and universal sort of consciousness or mind. They do not state this directly, but we can glean this from the conversation that they're having. So I think we should hear a short excerpt to make this clearer. Everybody says this person is intelligent and that one is not. So this may be one of the barriers to the whole thing, that behind the ordinary everyday thought, there is deeper thought of mankind. But we generally feel divided and say these various qualities either belong to us or they don't belong to us. Quite. It is the fragmentary mind that invents all this. It has been invented, but we have picked it up verbally and non-verbally by implication from childhood. Therefore, it pervades. It is the ground of our thoughts, of all our perceptions. So this has to be questioned. We have questioned it. That grief is not my grief. Grief is human, and so on. But how are people to see that because a person who is experiencing grief feels that this is his personal grief? I think it is partly because of our education, partly our society and traditions. But it is implicit in our whole way of thinking. Then we have to jump out of that, you see. Yes, to jump out of that becomes a problem. And then what am I to do? Perhaps we can see that love is not personal. Earth is not English earth or French earth. Earth is earth. I was thinking of an example in physics. If the scientist or chemist is studying an element such as sodium, he does not say it is his sodium or that somebody else studies his sodium. And of course they compare notes, etc. Quite. Sodium is sodium. Sodium is sodium universally. So we have to say that love is love universally. Yes, but you see, my mind refuses to see that because I'm so terribly personal, terribly concerned with me and my problems. I refuse to let that go. When you say sodium is sodium, it is very simple, I can see that. But when you say to me that grief is common to all of us, this is difficult. This can't be done with time, but it took quite a while for mankind to realize that sodium is sodium, you see. Is love something that is common to all of us? Well, insofar as it exists, it has to be common. Of course. It may not exist, but if it does, it has to be common. I'm not sure it does not exist. Compassion is not, I am compassionate. Compassion is there, is something that is not me. If we say compassion is the same as sodium, it is universal. Then every person's compassion is the same. compassion, love, and intelligence. You can have compassion without intelligence. So we say intelligence is universal too, obviously. So I'm not sure if this passage helps you to better understand what they mean by these four aspects of a sort of universal type of consciousness or mind. To be universal, you know. But nevertheless, that's what they claim. So at the end of this last chapter, the journey, if you will, that human mind needs to take in order to change and to arrive at such a state of consciousness, excuse me, which no longer centers around the notion of an I or me, or ego, is sort of painted, and the pathway which is open to us at all times can be summed up in the following hypothesis. The mind can go from the particular to the general, and from the general to the absolute, to the universal. So basically what this says is that the human mind is theoretically capable to move beyond or to transcend egoic consciousness, you know. And Krishnamurti formulates it in this way. From the particular, it is necessary to move to the general. From the general, to move still deeper. And there, perhaps, in the purity of what is called compassion, love, and intelligence. But that means giving your mind, your heart, your whole being to this inquiry. We have talked now for a long time. I think we have reached somewhere. So with these words, the conversation between David Bohm and Krishnamurti ends. And this also concludes our book review of The Ending of Time. I would like to just offer my personal view on, you know, reading this book and the impact it can have. Is that my personal experience with it is that when I first encountered it, that was a couple of years ago, I was in a different state of mind that I am today, obviously. I was in a let's say in a worse place than I am today. And at the time I was able to understand certain parts of the conversation on an intellectual level, let's say. At the same time, there was even though I couldn't claim to understand fully what's being said, I had a more like a feeling or an inner knowing, if you will, like an intuition, you know, that there is something in the text that is important and that is true. And I then put the book aside, you know, and I focused on getting better, you know, on getting healthy. And I think in this whole period of time, whatever seed that had been sown by this text, by this conversation, in this particular mind of mine. The seed grew and it was able to sort of grow in tandem with my having life experience, with my gathering life experience. So, and when I revisited the text, I did so, as part of a personal book project. So I wrote a book in which I heavily leaned on this conversation. And the book was sort of finished. The book, I put aside the book project. I lived some more. I gained some more life experience. And then I came back to the text again, which is through this book review that I did now with you together on YouTube. And every time I do, I feel that, I can understand, not only understand more, but I can see more in the text. So I think it's one of these books that you will have to pick up again and again over the course of your life, and to find, that every time you do, it will speak to you differently, and it's almost like your particular mind, if you will, is in a conversation, with the book. And your particular mind also enters into a sort of conversation with a, if you want, higher state of consciousness, that which they propose exists, which they propose we actually are. We are not finite, encapsulated, and separated, beings separated from each other or from everything else, but we are more of individual instances of the same all-pervading consciousness, universal consciousness. So that might clash with some of your convictions. I think my personal opinion is that any theory, any religion, any dogma, any creed, is useful to its particular period of time, both in individual life histories, but also in human history, and the history of humans in total. It's only as useful as it helps to, they are only as useful as they enable humans to sort of take the next evolutionary step, and they're only as useful as they enable harmonious cohabitation on this planet, and they're only as useful as they facilitate creativity and co-creation, So that, to me personally, is the sort of measure, that I hold any type of theory or creed or religion against. So that's just my personal opinion. And I'm just one instance. I'm just one manifestation of infinite consciousness, as much as everybody is, as much as all of you are. So anyway, I hope I was able to give you some food for thought with this book review, and I'm going to think of a next book to review. I have some ideas. Until then, I wish you all the best, and I'll see you soon.